So I just want to talk about God for a little bit because he is so cool and so good. And I feel like, sometimes God gets a bad rep because some people suck. Like I suck sometimes, not very often, but it has been, there have been a time or two where I've not been fantastic to people. And so I just want to kind of like give a brief overview of like my situation with God. So I am technically a Christian if we want to like do that thing. I love Jesus. I think Jesus is rad. Jesus, I believe, is the Son of God, like died, rose again, all for my sins, right? And your sins and whatever. So that's what I believe. I would just want to like back some stuff up before I got to this place. I'm currently 24 years old. When I was 11, my stepdad went to prison, and that was a crappy time, like so bad. We lost pretty much everything. My grandma moved here from Oregon to like help my mom and I and my little brother, so we didn't live out of our car. And that was just like honestly a really hard time of life. Like being 11 is hard as it is, I think. Your hormones are raging and like your body's changing, your friendships are changing, you're going to different, bigger school. Like all these things are just a lot for an 11-year-old. And so for all of this stuff, like my whole life being uprooted and changing was kind of a lot, but I just was like so used to feeling like I was in chaos that I didn't really recognize the effects that it had on my mental health. So I took care of my little brother while my mom worked full time and my grandma worked full time so they could keep us, alive and with a roof over our head and clothes and food. So I would basically take care of my brother when my mom wasn't home when she was working, and I would cook and clean and take him to school, or not take him to school, pick him up from school. And that was also hard during like middle school and high school because, well, the first half of high school because none of my other friends were doing that. Like I was responsible for a human and none of my other friends were. So I felt super alone in that. And I was also just super angry at God in general, like just like the God. I didn't like completely understand. Like I was raised as a Christian sort of, but we were like CNE Christians, like Christmas and Easter Christians. So I didn't really know much about God. And so I was just like angry at God, whoever that was. And then, yeah, so I was just like angry. And then my dad started going to church. And so I started going to church with him. And it was one of those like really boring churches to like myself. I thought it was super boring. They like sang out of the hymn, which is great. But I just would like try not to fall asleep on Sundays. But it was nice that people like seemed like they cared about me, and I was just so used to like, not that my mom didn't care about me, but she was like so focused on keeping us alive that it wasn't always warm at home. And so anyways, eventually my stepdad came home, and then life got really difficult because he was just not super kind all of the time. And then two of his daughters moved into our house. And so things just were super tight. There was like 6 of us in a 3-bedroom, maybe 7 of us in a 3-bedroom. And one of my sisters just really didn't like when I was in the room, like in our shared bedroom with her while she was like doing homework. So I like did homework in the garage by myself when it was like 90 degrees outside. It was rough. Okay. And you'd ask, why didn't you do it in the kitchen? Well, because my stepdad didn't like it when I erased with like an eraser off my paper. Like that was life. And it was just really awkward and hostile. Anyways, so that was just really bad. So basically my entire adolescence was trash. And I had severe social anxiety. I had severe depression, and I was suicidal for a little bit, and I didn't tell anybody. And I'm really grateful that I never went through with any of it. And I honestly believe at this point in my life, like God was saving me, like, because there were moments where I was just like at the end of myself. And there were times where like people wouldn't notice how long I was like gone for, like I could be like I would hide in the bathroom. People didn't notice that I was in the bathroom for so long. They just didn't pay attention to me. And so that was really hard. And anyway, so I struggled with like suicidal thoughts, and there were a handful of times where I just remember like thinking like my life isn't worth it and I could just like kill myself right now, like in the bathroom. I was like dark, deep dark thoughts. Like when we were driving, like especially when we get on the freeway, like there were handfuls of times where I just was like, what if I open the door? Like what's gonna happen? I'll probably die on impact. Like I really was in this dark place, and like I think about it now and it's just so sad. It's so incredibly sad that I was there. But every time I could just feel like something pushing me back to not take that plunge. And I believe that's God. That was God's doing. And so my senior year, like nobody in my family believed in anxiety. It's like, I don't believe that the climate's changing. I don't believe that our world's going to fall out of the sky because we use too much plastic. So they don't believe in it. They like at the time were like, you're not anxious, you're just dramatic. You're not stressed, you're dramatic. So that's like kind of the household that I was in during this peak of anxiety that I was dealing with. And one day my mom, she was like, let's go for a drive together and just talk, which is a trap. Like, don't do that, kids. Don't get in the car. Don't. You're trapped. And so my mom wanted to talk about college because it was my senior year and like what did I want to do after high school. And it just gave me so much anxiety. I had a full-blown panic attack in front of her, and I was like out of control. Like my body was out of control, my breathing was out of control. I was like crying and screaming and like flailing around because I literally was so out of control. And I got out of a moving car. Like it was not moving quickly by any means. Like I literally like started walking. Like it was very slow because we were in the neighborhood. And when I opened the door, she like slowed down significantly because she's like, oh my gosh, what's happening? So she had to like drive around the neighborhood and like coax me back into the car. And you know, I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I think I need to go to the hospital. Like I feel crazy. I feel like I'm losing my mind and I'm insane, and I think you need to admit me. Like I just was so scared of my own self. And she was like, you're having a panic attack, you're okay, blah blah blah. So then she like reasoned that I do have an anxiety problem. Didn't try to get me therapy, didn't try to get me help. We went to one therapist and that was it. And I told her I didn't like that therapist because the therapist wasn't helpful. The therapist literally told me that my family needed therapy, like my parents needed therapy, and that I didn't. And I was like, but I'm here and I'm asking for help. And she disregarded me. So that was like super frustrating. My mom didn't try to help find me another therapist. So all this to say, I graduate high school, take a semester of school off because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a nurse and I had all these plans and they didn't work out. So my mom told me I needed to go to this Bible study through my church for the college people. And I was like, well, I'm not in college. And she's like, you're of college age, just go. And so I met up with, so it's a husband and a wife that leads this group. And I met up with a wife for coffee because I didn't really know them. And so we met up for coffee and we hit it off. And it was the best thing. Like it's like the best meeting with somebody from a church I had ever had. And so we talked, and then eventually I went to their Bible study, and it was a Nacho Libre night. So it was called Nacho Night. So they ate nachos and watched Nacho Libre, and that was my first experience at their Bible study. And by this time, like I reasoned that God was real, Jesus is the Son of God, but I didn't know why I was struggling so much, and like why God didn't save me from that if he really loved me. So that's kind of where I was at when I got to their Bible study. And after being a part of that Bible study for a few months, I was just like, dang, these people seem pretty cool. So I just kept going and going. And then about a year in, I finally felt like maybe these people care, because I didn't share a lot with them as far as my personal life went, like what I was struggling with at home and the hostility that I was living in. Like I just didn't talk about it. And then about a year into it, I said something. It was during our prayer request time, and I told them something that I was struggling with my stepdad. And they were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, this is the thing that happened, but it was probably my fault. And it was the first time somebody had told me it's not your fault, and that behavior, how they're treating you, isn't okay. And that was kind of, I was shook, if you will. Like nobody had ever told me that. That wasn't something that I knew. which seems silly, but I literally had no idea. And so when they told me that, my eyes were kind of just like a little bit opened, and I was just like, what do you mean? Like, I think that I did the wrong thing, so if you could just pray for me to like be better. And they're like, no, like you're doing the right thing, and this person is treating you poorly. So anyways, I've been going to that Bible study for about 4 years now, and these people who have told me that have walked with me through the hardest times of my life as a young adult, and through horrible experiences at work, horrible experiences at home, friendships, like all of these things. They've just been there, this couple, and they're like my parents. They're people that I call mom and dad, because as much as I love my mom and my dad and my stepdad, like I love these people, but they like fell so short. And like it was really hard because they feel more like friends or like cousins or something. They don't feel like parents because they don't do the things that I need them to do as parents. And so like I found family in these people, and they taught me like what does it look like to live a life that's glorifying God, because like my parents say that they love Jesus and they love God, but their actions reflect otherwise. And to watch people live out what it looks like to love Jesus and love their family and it look the same is amazing, and it's fantastic. And they like taught me what that looks like by doing it, not by saying anything, but by living it out. And so now I work in youth ministry, and I'm trying to emulate that same thing, not to be like them, but to be more like Jesus, because that's what they're trying to do. And like God is so good. He like brought me through this giant healing process over the past 4 years, where I've been able to be like, to honestly say that I don't struggle with anxiety anymore. There are moments where I feel nervous or anxious when something big is going to happen, but there's like not been a time in the last, I want to say 3 years, I've not had a panic attack. I used to wake up for 5 or 6 years straight, wake up with anxiety, and I don't anymore. And I attribute that straight to the healing of Jesus Christ, right? Like he did that. And I've like had relationships somewhat restored. Like I can have a conversation with my mom now and not fight with her. That's amazing. That's restoration through Jesus Christ. There are these things that God does for us that's just so amazing when we allow him into our life and just surrender that stuff to us, to him. It's not about him having like manipulating us and controlling us. He lets us have free will, and it's our free will to choose to surrender, because he can do better things with our brokenness than we can, because we can't fix ourselves and we can't fix other people. We can do our best every day, and we can surrender the rest to God. And I think that's awesome. We don't have to do anything but just be like, I can't do this anymore. Like I don't want to worry about my anxiety. I don't want to struggle with anxiety. Here's my family situation. Here are my relationships. Have at it, because you're going to do the better thing for me than I can choose to do, because I'm going to mess up, because I'm a person. So that's where I'm at with God. I think he's really cool. And I'm cool too. He thinks I'm cool. He's cool. I think, what? I can't talk anymore. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this really long rant about Jesus. If you have questions, comments, concerns, or rude remarks, please feel free to slide into my DMs on Instagram at Jordan Acacia, JordanAcacia. I hope you know that there's a God out there that loves you. If you don't, let's talk about it.